There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Shoff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I am your host, Richard Shoff. The program is sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes, where you can get a great deal on a log home. Just give me a call. I'll work with you personally. We, me, the country, company, the radio station, we're all pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, Second Amendment, and I'm here by the grace of God. Thankful for this opportunity. I was listening to my car radio coming over to tape this broadcast today, and they were singing a song about the blood. Kind of fit in with what I wanted to talk about, the blood of Jesus. What's that got to do with my program? A whole lot, folks. A whole lot. It goes back, to start with, to the forgiveness of our sins 2,000 years ago. Those of us that got saved, in my opinion, my interpretation, is that we were saved at Calvary. Our sins to be remembered no more. The blood, the shedding of the blood, was what was necessary for our salvation. Had nothing to do with when we acknowledged it. That was a separate. We acknowledged it whenever we bowed our knee at the altar or wherever. But our sins were forgiven before we were ever conceived or even thought of. And so were the sins of our president. I want to talk about our president and the divine intervention that put him in office. It was unheard of, unexpected. I believe it was caused by the fervent prayer of believers. I believe that he's there by the hand of God through our prayers. Don't know how many of you remember back on election night. I didn't realize what was happening. I heard about it afterwards. But fearfully, I was watching the early returns, and it didn't look good. Virginia was looking good, but I know that the later vote in Virginia is going to switch it over to Dems. It was about 9 o'clock, as I recall, when Florida came through, and it looked like he had a chance in North Carolina. But what I didn't know at the time, there were prayers from fervent believers that had started in Jerusalem that day. These prayers spread across America throughout the day, throughout the night. And we had a miracle. We had a miracle. Is our president a perfect man? No. I do believe he is a forgiven man, because I believe that he's accepted Christ, which means that his and our forgiveness were at Calvary some 2,000 years ago. Trump was chosen of God for this time in America. It's not a Republican thing. It's not a conservative thing. It's not a Trump thing. It's a God thing. And it'll continue to be a God's thing as long as we believers stay true and faithful in our prayer support of this man. It's a supernatural force. And believers, we are part of it. But I want to look at some of the human things that are happening right now. You know, we wondered how is Trump going to make it? And how can he go through it? We had the Green Party candidate trying to go for a third vote or another vote, checking a bunch of polls. He only had like 5% in the whole country. There was talk about getting the electors to be unfaithful to their pledges and sell him out. Every time he'd open his mouth, even I thought sometimes, boy, this is going to be it. But it wasn't. It was a supernatural thing. And it still is. More knowledgeable people than me have done research and determined that nowhere in history of our country has any president been so maligned and attacked as Donald Trump has been and is continuing to be. But let's just look at a few of the things, the physical things that he's putting up with right now. First off, he's got a leader of our Justice Department that might as well be a Democrat. And boy, I wouldn't have said that when there was first rumors out that Trump was unhappy with Jeff Sessions. I almost turned against my president. I said, man, how can he not love old Jeff Sessions? Well, even some of the staunchest senators are now starting to see that it's time for Trump to get rid of Sessions. Oh, I don't mean today, but there will be a time very closely. Lindsey Graham even said that he was on board with a plan to get rid of him. The Obama-ran sector of the shadow government's making moves against Trump, but Trump is poised to launch his counterattack against the establishment. And to do it, he's going to have to get rid of that inept Attorney General Jeff Sessions, purge the traitorous moles within the deep state, and declassifies the much sought-after redacted information pertaining to Hillary Clinton's email investigation and the phony Russia collusion probe. See, I don't know whether you know it or not, but all this classified information, Trump can declassify any information that he wants to. One of the powers he has. Two key Republican senators signaled to President Trump that he could replace Attorney General Jeff Sessions. With their blessing, they suggested he wait till after the midterm elections. I agree with that. This would open the way for a move of her firing Robert Mueller or constraining his probe into the Russian meddling in the 2016. You see, the president's entitled to an attorney general that he has faith in, somebody that's qualified for the job. Lindsey Graham said, and I think there will come a time sooner rather than later when it'll be time to have a new face and a fresh voice at the Department of Justice. Again, quoting Senator Graham's, clearly Attorney General Sessions doesn't have the confidence of the president. Sessions defended his performance in what I thought was a very, very defiant statement, his tone, his words. He said, while I'm the Attorney General, the actions of the Department of Justice will not be improperly influenced by political considerations. He's pretty much telling our president, his boss, that he didn't want him interfering or putting what Jeff Sessions would determine were political considerations up. I don't know how our president kept his mouth shut and didn't use his favorite term, "you're fired." Graham warned against acting against Sessions before the midterm elections. He said that'd be a non-starter. It'd raise havoc with the Senate's efforts to confirm Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Kavanaugh. And while the midterm elections are in November, we can wait till after that. But this is a significant shift from Graham's stance of a year ago when he warned Trump publicly that if he fired Sessions, there's going to be hell to pay. Also, Senator Chuck Grassley, the current Judiciary Chairman, changed his position, saying in an interview that he'd be able to make time for hearings for a new Attorney General, after saying in the past that the panel was too busy to tackle that explosive possibility. These two senators spoke as two federal investigations are drawing closer to the president. Mueller's probe is newly energized after the conviction of Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. Trump potentially faces a separate Justice Department investigation into campaign violations sparked by the guilty plea of his former lawyer, Michael Cohen. Senator Graham has provided a sometimes confounding mix of criticism and praise for Trump. They occasionally golf together at one of Trump's resorts. They get to talk a little bit there, a little bit off the record, I imagine. Really wasn't clear why Graham would publicly predict Trump would take such a politically explosive action, even as the senator said that it should be delayed. Graham's comments could be sending a message that Mueller faces a deadline to finish his Russia investigation before November's election. You know, that's where they're going to determine whether the Republicans can continue to control the House and the Senate. If Trump does replace Sessions, who so far resisted Trump's very public hints that he might want to resign, a new attorney general could take over the investigation and fire Mueller or cripple his probe or do a bunch of other things that might be worthwhile. Trump wouldn't need to wait until his new choice for Attorney General was confirmed by the Senate, and that could really be a difficult fight. He could install an interim Attorney General after ousting Sessions. The way that works, folks, and it is a legal way to do it, when the session is not in session, play on words there, when they're not in order, when they're not meeting, the president has the right to make a temporary appointment, and it's good, I believe, up to 12 months. And then they're out again. It happened. Bush II, I think, did it. He did it for our representative at the time to the United Nations. Anyway, there's ways to get somebody else in there. We have to have somebody in there that's going to go for someone other than Republicans. If you noted, that's about all they're going after with Sessions there, are Republicans. Ask about a possible replacement for Sessions. Grassley took a different position from a year ago when he warned the House that he didn't have time for another confirmation hearing that year. He says now he does have time for hearings that the president might send up there, a change from last year. Grassley noted that Kavanaugh's confirmation should take precedent over any other Trump nominees that might be sent to the Senate. Grassley declined to comment specifically on the fate of Sessions when asked about Graham's prediction that the president will replace him after the election. There's growing consensus, folks, that Sessions is going to have to go, that Mueller is completely out of control, that it may very well be an illegal witch hunt anyway. And folks, I do believe that Americans will draw a red line against the deep state attempt upon President Trump. And I think that line is the impeachment of the one man who has the courage to stand up to the greatest political criminals that America has ever seen. While President Trump's attorney Rudy Giuliani recently told Sky News during an interview that Americans would revolt if President Trump is impeached, none other than the former NSA and CIA Director Michael Hayden also recently warned that impeaching President Trump would have, quote, unintended consequences and be viewed as a soft coup, end quote. With most awakened Americans now realizing that the sham Russian collusion investigation was created by Hillary Clinton and the corrupt factor of the deep state, and that the real crimes were being committed by Hillary and the DNC, with a politicized FBI and DOJ weaponized to protect them and to cover it all up, to cover up the Clinton crime family crimes, Hayden and Giuliani's warnings may not be too far off the mark. With many of the other top comments also echoing the theme of this one, it's quite clear that Americans have had it with the deep state corruption and draw their own line in the sand. That's right. One against that corrupted faction of the deep state, and that put Hillary Clinton ahead of America. And that line is the impeachment of the one human being in Washington with the courage to stand up to a long-running government corruption problem. Folks, Americans have been remarkably patient, outrageously patient, unbelievably patient. But we're not a passive people, and there is a line that we will not allow to be crossed. That line is the impeachment of the one man who has had the courage to stand up to the greatest political criminals the U.S. has ever seen. I do not believe, fellow Americans, that we will allow President Trump to be removed from office. And there are no limits to what we may well do to prevent it. Awakened Americans will see nothing soft about the ongoing and continuous attempt to take down President Trump from these efforts being largely made at the urging of former U.S. President Barack Obama and election loser Hillary Clinton. And as one commentator mentions, while the left would be dancing wildly in the streets at a Trump impeachment, American patriots would be seething with anger, with most conservatives seeing the inaction of the DOJ upon Hillary Clinton's crimes, while they all-out attack President Trump over a lie that he may have told, as nothing short of a full-blown coup. Voices have warned for almost 2 years now that the globalists who took over America had no intention of allowing President Trump to accomplish his America First agenda and would do anything and everything within their power to take President Trump down, including pulling a JFK on him. You heard what I said there. And while we've prayed that God would shield President Trump with his armor, with so many different globalists seeking his scalp, and the weaponized leftists quite literally losing their minds over him, we still see the ongoing witch hunt from Robert Mueller and the 17 angry Democrats, and the fact that they have no intention of stopping it. Yet with the entire Russian collusion investigation clearly fruit of the poisonous tree, with the Steele dossier proven to be a concoction of Hillary, the mere fact that the investigation continues to this day, taking down former press Trump allies such as Paul Manafort, shows that this could go on for a long, long time if the Dems have their way. It's been said that a grand jury could indict a ham sandwich if that's what they wanted. And with seemingly nothing standing in the way of Robert Mueller finding at least something tiny wrong with President Trump or his campaign, hinting that the deep state won't let this rest and allow President Trump to do the job he was elected to do, we thoroughly understand why former U.S. presidential candidate Patrick Buchanan recently predicted that America is in for a hellish year. Recently tweeted from Trump, I'm going to quote, Jeff Sessions said he wouldn't allow politics to influence him only because he doesn't understand what is happening beneath his command position. Highly conflicted Bob Mueller and his gang of 17 angry Dems are having a field day as real corruption goes untouched. No collusion. A quote from Donald Trump. With President Trump recently calling out Attorney General Jeff Sessions on just that point, the total and complete hypocrisy that we've seen by the Department of Justice and FBI completely negligently failing to hold to the rule of law when it comes to Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and the Democrat Party, that silence has been deafening itself. How can America ever return to the rule of law when the rule of law has been weaponized to protect Hillary while taking aim at conservatives, Christians, and those who still support the U.S. Constitution? And the silence on the corruption and collusion in the deep state, the Democrat Party, by fake news mainstream media, this also tells us a tale that the others will never tell. The mainstream media has been fully cooperating with and facilitating the takedown of America, hence the extremely popular label, enemy of the American people. Should Hillary Clinton and the corrupted faction of the deep state remain unpunished for their laundry list of crimes, while President Trump is taken down for what amounts to some kind of technicality, if and when that happens, all of America will finally have absolute proof that we're no longer a constitutional republic, but the globalists have successfully transformed our nation into a banana republic where corrupt politicians go unnoticed. Now, folks, we're talking about here the human side of things, and we don't want to forget the spiritual side that we started with. My personal belief is that as long as Christians remain fruitful, as long as they remain faithful, as long as we continue to hold our president and his administration up before God, that God will hear our prayers. And God will continue to hold our president in that position. And you know, you wonder, do the Democrats really want an impeachment fight? If anyone's looking for a good lawyer, President Trump ruthfully said, I would, and I'm quoting, I would strongly suggest that you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen is no Roy Coyne. That was a great lawyer. Trump's ex-lawyer staring at 5 years imprisonment recently pleaded guilty to a campaign violation that might not have even been a crime. Cohen has fronted the cash, $130,000, to pay slut star Stormy Daniels for keeping quiet about a decade-old triast with Trump. He'd also brokered a deal whereby the National Enquirer bought the rights to a story about Trump affair with a Playboy model, and they killed the story. Cohen claims he and Trump thus conspired to violate federal law. But you see, paying girlfriends to keep past indiscretions private is neither a crime nor a campaign violation. And Trump could legally contribute as much as he wished to for his own campaign for president. Would a Democrat House, assuming we get one, really impeach a president for paying hush money to old girlfriends? Hence the high fives among never-Trumpers are just a bit premature. But if Cohen's guilty plea and the recent conviction of campaign manager Paul Manafort do not imperil Trump today, they could portend what is ominous. Cohen handled Trump's dealings for more than a decade and has pledged full cooperation with prosecutors from both the Southern District of New York and the Robert Mueller investigation. Nothing that comes of this collaboration will be helpful to our president. Also, Manafort, now a convicted felon facing life in prison, has got about the most compelling of motives to flip and reveal anything that might be useful to Mueller and harmful to Trump. And of course, then there's the Mueller probe itself. Did you know that 26 months after the Watergate break-in, that Nixon had resigned? 26 months after the hacking of the DNC and John Podesta's emails, Mueller has yet to deliver hard evidence the Trump campaign colluded with Putin's Russia, though this was his mandate. That's why he's got the investigation. However, having for a year now been marching White House aides and campaign associates of Trump before a grand jury, Mueller's probably holding more cards than he's showing. And even if they do not directly implicate the president, more indictments may well be coming down. Mueller may not have the power to haul the president before a grand jury or indict him. After all, it's Parliament that disposes and beheads the kings, not the Sheriff of Nottingham. But Mueller will file a report with the Department of Justice that will be sent to the House. And as this Congress has only weeks left before the 2018 election, it'll be the new House that meets in January that may well be Democratic that's going to receive Mueller's report. Still, as of now, it's hard to see how 2/3 of a new Senate would convict this president of high crimes and misdemeanors. Yep, we're in for a hellish year, folks. You see, Trump's not going to resign. To do so would open him up to grand jury subpoenas, federal charges, civil suits for the rest of his life. To resign would be to give up his sword and shield and all of his immunity. He'd be crazy to leave himself naked to his enemies. And you know, folks, it's really not Donald's nature, is it? Recently, I was telling a friend of mine, we were discussing Trump, and I said, you know, he's kind of like a shark in the water. And that blood challenges when there's a problem, and they cut another piece of meat or dump a gallon of blood in there, it just excites him. He goes nuts. He's joyous. It turns him on. You've seen his vindictiveness. Nah, he's not going to resign. Well, given his belief that he's under attack by people who hate him and believe that he's an illegitimate president and seek to bring him down, he's going to use all the powers of the presidency to fight for his survival. And as he's shown, these powers are considerable. He's got the power to rally his emotional following, to challenge courts to fire justice officials and FBI executives, to pull security clearances, to pardon the convicted. Democrats who have grown giddy about taking the House might want to consider what a campaign to bring down the president, this president, who is supported by a large swath of the nation and has fighting allies, even in the press. It may not be the big thing that they would like it to be. Why do it? Especially if they know in advance the Senate would not convict. And folks, it does take 2/3 of the Senate to convict any impeachment that the House can pass by simple majority vote. That America has no desire for a political struggle to the death over impeachment is evident. Recognition of this reality is why the Democratic Party is assuring America that impeachment is not what they really have in mind. Today it's the Republican leaders who are under pressure to break with Trump, denounce him, and call for new investigations into alleged collusion with the Russians. But if Democrats capture the House, then they're going to be the ones under intolerable pressure from their own media auxiliaries to pursue impeachment. Taking the House would put newly elected Democrats under fire right from the get-go. They'd be ready to form a lynching mob, and from the mainstream media for not only doing their duty and moving immediately to impeach Trump. Boy, would the pressure be on. Well, Democrats have been laboring for 2 years to win back the House, but if they discover that the first duty demanded of them by their rabid followers is to impeach President Trump, they may wonder why they were so eager to win it after all. And a word from one of my favorite sources, Alan Dershowitz, the Newsmax TV. It was a bad day for Trump, but he's not out. Yeah, he told, Alan Dershowitz told Newsmax TV that the Paul Manafort verdict and Michael Cohen's guilty plea marked a bad day for the White House. But the suggestions that Donald Trump's team was finished, he said, quote, seems a little over the top and exaggerated to me. He said it's a serious problem for the president, but some of the networks have been playing taps, basically saying this presidency is at an end. Allen replied, I think that's a little bit over the top and greatly exaggerated. Don't have time to get into all of this, but I want to cover what I can. It's an article put out by Karen McQuillan. Patriotism is the secret of Trump's success. The driving force between Trump's winning for America is his powerful patriotism. Patriotism is a virtue that our politicians talk about a lot in utterly empty ways. Many Democrats think it is a vice. The left wing of the Democratic Party mistakes it for white nationalism. Trump loves American patriotism. It's the reason he ran for president, and one of the reasons he won. He knows we are a great nation. Trump recognizes and is comfortable with power, his personal power, America's power. He doesn't think power is toxic. He thinks American and presidential power is wonderful and meant to be used for our common national good. You see, our president loves to build. He used to build big apartment and hotel towers with his name on them. Now he's building up America because he loves America. President Trump's patriotism has these two equal parts, a strong economy and a strong military. You see, his eye is on the prize of jobs and security. Patriotism overflows in his speeches of achieving a quarter of 4.1 growth for the economy and for the return of fallen heroes, their remains, from North Korea. In everything we do, in every action we take, we're fighting for loyal, hard-working, patriotic citizens of our blessed nation. We're making our country strong. We're making our country great again. We're respected again all over the world. Our military will soon be stronger than it's ever been, by far. Unlike his political rivals, President Trump wants to use our full power. We don't need to be intimidated by anybody, not China, not the EU, Russia, Iran, terrorists. We are the powerhouse. Trump seeks to create a win-win situation, and he will not compromise on American interests. If someone is going to lose, it's going to be the other side, not us. Trump is a builder. He likes to do things. He likes responsibility. He likes seeing concrete outcomes. He knows that America can do things. We're so rich and so powerful as a country, we can do everything we need to do to promote American security and prosperity. Using America for these ends is nothing to be ashamed of. He knows it's his job. Now back to the spiritual that we started with, folks. Our job as believers is to hold our president and his administration up before God. Trump was made president because of our prayers and because of the will and direct action of God. Let us remain faithful in our support of our president. Let's let him know we've got his back as we hold him up before that power that forgave his sins and ours some 2,000 years ago. Goodbye until next week.